Thanks for joining. We're going to give folks just another second here, and then we'll dive in. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Jenny Anselmo-Sarles. I'm the Chief Spokesperson for the Park Service. I'll be here facilitating this afternoon's briefing. Speaking on today's briefing will be Yellowstone National Park Superintendent Cam Shawley and Park County, Montana County Commissioner Bill Berg. Both will provide some opening remarks. Superintendent Shawley will also share a presentation with a map and visuals as he speaks. After they speak, we will take Q&A.
Recording in progress.
As you know, the situation in Yellowstone is dynamic, so please bear with us. If Superintendent Shawley or Commissioner Berg lose video connectivity, we'll do our best to resolve the issue and continue on. This briefing is fully on the record, and reporters are welcome to record this session. We are also recording this call as well, and we will make it available for anyone who asks. To request a copy of the recording, please email newsmedia@nps.gov. It may take a few hours to render after the call, but we'll provide it as soon as we can. I'll also provide instructions in the chat for all reporters in attendance. There are many reporters on this briefing. I see over 100 people right now. We are going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible. At the bottom of your Zoom screen is a Q&A function. Please consider submitting your questions throughout the presentation using this function. We will do our best to get to as many as possible. During the Q&A, we will also have the function so reporters can raise your hand on the Zoom hand at the bottom of your screen. When we call on you, we will also unmute you so that you'll be able to come on and answer your question. Again, we'd prefer if you can drop those in the Q&A just so we can be as efficient as possible with the number of folks on. With that, I am going to turn it over to Superintendent Cam Shawley. So Superintendent Shawley, if you can come off camera, we will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Jenny, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great, thanks for putting this together, and thanks to all of you for joining as we're in day 2 of this major flood event here in Yellowstone. I want to first say thanks to all of you that have shown interest and reported so well on everything that's happening here. I hope that the time here together gives you some more information about what we've been doing over the last day and a half or so, and what's planned for upcoming days. Sunday night and over the weekend and then into Sunday night, we received about 2 to 3 inches of rain with some warming temperatures that look like dropped on about 5.5 inches of snow that melted and caused a major flood event in most of the northern range of Yellowstone, including the Yellowstone River, obviously, Lamar Rivers, all of their tributaries. The impacts to the park, as I'll show you here in a minute, are most serious in the area between Gardner and Cook City. And Kristen, if you can forward to the map, please. Most of you are, I hope, somewhat familiar with Yellowstone. I want to just kind of give you an orientation to this map. And Kristen can use her cursor, but upper left big dot is Gardner. The upper right big dot is Cook City. Both of those towns are in Montana. The road corridor between Mammoth and Cook City, and then the loop around Norris Canyon is called what we call the northern loop of Yellowstone. The loop below it is called the Southern Loop. Just so you have that reference, because I'm going to refer to both of those as we go through this. The flood event mostly and most seriously impacted the road between Mammoth Hot Springs and Gardner. Kristen will point that out. It's about a 5-mile section of road to the north entrance. I'll show you some pictures here. Most of you that have seen the video that we released from our helicopter yesterday have seen a lot of the damage within that corridor. The road from Lamar Valley to Cook City, secondarily, is an area that has been substantially impacted. We still have very high water as of today. There's some conflicting predictions about this weekend and whether or not we may have another high water event coming. We still have somewhere around 12 inches of snowpack left. And if we get warming temperatures and the right mixture of precipitation like we did Sunday, we could have another flood event coming through Yellowstone in the upcoming 4 or 5 days. I'll come back to this map, but Chris, if you want to just kind of click through a couple of the photos. This is a section of road that is between Mammoth and Gardner, Montana. Mammoth, Wyoming is kind of where the headquarters is. This is a Gardner, and the north entrance is usually the second or third back and forth tide entrance for most visitation coming through the park. West entrance being the first, and the north entrance here at Gardner kind of ties with the south entrance in Jackson. Supports a very high volume of visitation through the park. But what I want to kind of point out here is that this is not, and this is just one section, this is not going to be an easy rebuild. There's obviously things that we're going to need to do to stabilize once the water comes down, assess what the full damage is and the length of that corridor, but also with the right people assessing whether it makes sense to build here in the future. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later. But we'll click through a couple shots and we'll go back to full screen so we can talk about kind of what we're doing. So if you want to hit the next couple pictures, Kristen. Another shot from a different angle, same road. Next slide. A lot of this, so where the road's not fully gone, like in those previous pictures, but is compromised. And so each one of these segments that looks like this will have to be evaluated and figured out how we can stabilize it and make it safe for travel. Next slide. This is one section in the section between Lamar Valley and Cook City. It's another example where the road's been completely washed away, where the river potentially has changed course, perhaps permanently. And so we'll be evaluating whether or not we need to make some roadway realignments. Next slide. As most of you know, a lot of bridges that support trail usage in Yellowstone with so many waterways, backcountry bridges, even bridges that are close to the road for hiking trails and things like that. This is an example of the Rescue Creek Bridge between Mammoth and Gardner. This bridge is now gone since this picture was taken, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of bridges in the backcountry that we'll need to do evaluations on moving forward. Next slide. Considerable amount of mudslides, rock slides, trees down. Next slide. This is a section of road between Mammoth and Cook City. So a lot of debris, especially in areas where the rivers ran across the roads and brought down substantial numbers of trees, which will require considerable work to clear. Next slide. Next slide. This was a housing unit that 6 of our employees and families lived in the town of Gardner. It was fairly immediately Sunday night compromised by high flood waters to the point where we evacuated it first thing on Monday morning yesterday. Last night, somewhere around 7 p.m., this entire structure succumbed to flood pressures and went into the river. This is the Yellowstone River just north of Gardner. That entire structure floated on the water for about 5 miles. Unfortunately, although a lot of the belongings did get out of this house, many of our employees lost a considerable amount. So we're working on a full range of actions to support those employees. And I think that's the last slide, Kristen, right? If we can go back to the map real quick. So what we've focused most on in this last day or so, or day and a half, has been, as you can see, those road conditions are extremely dangerous, unstable. Remember, it's mid-June in Yellowstone. The park was, not only was the park full of visitors, the gateway communities were also full, including Gardner. We had to make a decision yesterday because of unsafe conditions to move all of the visitors out of northern Yellowstone, and we pushed them south into the southern loop. Bill will talk a little bit about this in a minute, but the town of Gardner was cut off on the other side because of flooding roads on Highway 89 into Montana, which have since just recently reopened over the last couple hours. But we had several thousand visitors stranded in Gardner, along with residents, because they couldn't come into the park because of the road damage, and they couldn't exit to the north to Livingston because of road damage. We'll chat a little bit more about that. Once we got the visitors yesterday out of the northern loop, we proceeded to start evaluating more carefully what the impacts of flooding were on the southern loop, and from everything from the roads to the bridges to wastewater treatment facilities and those types of things. The damage on the southern loop is much less than the northern loop. However, there are several areas on that loop that are potentially compromised that we're evaluating. So we went ahead and made the decision to clear the park of visitors completely. And so as of this morning, all visitors are currently out of Yellowstone. Because it's mid-June, because Yellowstone has a lot of backcountry use, we had a large number of backcountry campers and users that we've tracked, have made contact with. We have put a full closure of the Yellowstone backcountry into place, and we have contacted or know the whereabouts of every backcountry user currently in Yellowstone. Right now, there's only one group remaining in the Northern Range. We have made contact with them. We were prepared to do helicopter evacuations if necessary. That hasn't been necessary up to this point. And we will evaluate the backcountry as time goes on to determine when it's safe to reopen. Another big key is another big factor we focused on is supporting the communities of Gardner and Cook City. Both communities, to one degree or another, were cut off from food and water. The communities, the county, the state has done a great job of getting support, getting the road reopened north, and getting visitors evacuated from Gardner into to north on Highway 89 toward Livingston. That's been happening over the last couple hours, and we're standing by, and I'll let Bill talk more about that, but to provide any level of support that's necessary to these communities in addition to what we're doing inside of Yellowstone. $1 million question is, what's the damage? Answer is we don't know exactly yet. Water is extremely high. We're not putting teams in harm's way at this point. When the water subsides, probably early next week, we will be pulling together a large number of people from different agencies around the country to come to Yellowstone and help us assess what the damage is to various infrastructure in the park. So we will not know. I mean, you can see by the pictures, it's extensive, but we will not know exactly what the timelines are, what the costs are, or any of that information until we get teams on the ground and can actually assess what happened and what it's going to take to repair it. On top of all this, we've been out of power here in Mammoth for about 30 hours. We've had multiple power failures in other parts of the park. I commend Northwestern Energy for getting teams on the ground as quickly as possible. They're conducting repairs as we speak, and we're hopeful that electricity will be back on in Yellowstone here within the next couple hours. Last thing that I'll cover, and I'll hand it over to Bill, is most of you can see, or well, most of you know that Yellowstone can receive up to 1 million people per month and 1 million visits per month in the summer months. We will likely not reopen the road between Gardner and Cook City for the rest of this season, looking at the damage. I'll stay as optimistic as possible, but even if we got started right now, I'm not sure we could get the road on the northern end reopened. So that will likely stay closed for the rest of the season. What we've been engaged in substantial conversations with gateway communities, including West Yellowstone and Cody and Gardner and others in Jackson here soon, is how do we take an appropriate amount of visitation and when it's safe to do so, reopen that southern loop. One thing that we definitely know is that half the park cannot support all of the visitation. So we are exploring a range of options, including some timed entry, potential reservation type systems that we would look to implement when the South Loop is safe to open. A couple other things, because the power's been out for as long as it has, we've had wastewater treatment facility failures in multiple locations, backup generator failures, reinforcing the decision to move visitors out of the park as a good one. But all of that infrastructure is going to need to be checked and evaluated before we want to put visitors back in the park. And so we've had daily conversations with the communities, very good feedback. We've had some short-term objectives like getting the visitors out of Gardner, getting resupplied, getting the power back on, some of those basic things. Now we're moving into some of the kind of more medium term. What does reopening and when does it look like that could happen? And that would only be on the southern loop. So in this map, Norris Canyon down or south. And so I want to say we've had tremendous support from the secretary. I talked to her this morning, talked to the director of the Park Service this morning. Incredible support from both the governor of Montana and Wyoming. Congressional delegations from Montana and Wyoming have been extremely supportive, as has the work with our partners in Park County, Montana, our business partners in the park. This is absolutely a team effort. We know how important this is to everyone. We're doing our best job to stabilize the situation until we can get the water down, assess what the damage is, and then we'll work on a plan together for reopening as that becomes feasible. So with that, I'll stop, Jenny, and hand it back over to you and to Bill, I think.
Sounds good. We'll stop sharing the screen and turn it over to Commissioner Bill Berg from Park County, Montana.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you, Cam. A little bit ironic that this spectacular landscape was created by violent geologic and hydrologic events, and it's just not very handy when it happens while we're all here settled on it. Park County actually gets its name from Yellowstone Park. Park County has 2 of Yellowstone's 5 entrances, and as you saw from that map, one is Gardner, Montana, established 140 years ago. The other is Cook City and Silvergate. And the only way to get to Cook City and Silvergate for our county staff is through Yellowstone Park. So Cam's challenges are significant, as are ours. We can't provide law enforcement services out there right now. Public health services, we can't get out there to pick up the garbage. Some of this stuff is pretty basic. We can't get out there to help clean up the streets because they had their own flood event. Sunday night was when we got our first alert that there was trouble on the horizon, when two of our bridges on the Bannock Trail between Silvergate and Cook City washed out. Shortly thereafter, a third washed out. And the public works director and I had plans to go out there early Monday morning, and he couldn't even make it to Gardner. So the landscape literally and figuratively has changed dramatically in the last 36 hours. Gardner's a pretty rough and tumble place. It was established in 1880 by a gentleman who was actually asked to leave Mammoth because he had opened up a hotel there the year before Yellowstone became a park. And he headed down the hill and laid out a town site right on the boundary. So it's a company town. It's a Yellowstone town, and it lives and dies by tourism. And this is going to be a pretty big hit. COVID hit us like the rest of the world, March of 2020. We had a pretty dramatic fire in Gardner that next summer, which hit us really hard on top of the impacts of the pandemic. And now we got a little fire or a little flood to add to the mix. Gardner businesses actually did really well last year. The ones I talked to have said that they broke records. I think that's just a little bit of pent-up travel desire after COVID. The businesses I talked to had reservations that were running even stronger for this summer, and now that's all gone. So businesses are already trying to sort out what they're going to do with their seasonal staff. They can't afford to keep them. Their business projections are shot. Reservations are being canceled. Folks are asking for refunds, which is understandable. Some businesses may have already spent that money. So they're looking to try to figure out how to hold things together, because to make a living in Gardner, which I expect is true in all the gateway communities, you have to budget pretty hard. You have to make hay while the sun shines, and you have to hang on to your cash over the winter so that you can afford to open the doors in the spring. And this is hitting just a couple of weeks after Memorial Day. So it's going to be pretty tough for Gardner businesses to recover from. And that's not even to mention the impacts to the infrastructure. We're still assessing the damage to the sewer and water system in Gardner. The sewer system actually serves Mammoth Hot Springs as well, so that's critical for all of us. Most of us consider Mammoth and Gardner, even though we span 2 park counties and 2 states, most of us consider that to be one community. So we have a lot to work on together. As Cam mentioned, Montana Department of Transportation has been critical so far. Our county road crew was working side by side with the Department of Transportation throughout the night and into the day-to-day to get Yankee Jim Canyon opened up. And that created a bit of a relief valve. So the visitors have been able to get out of Gardner. Supplies at the grocery store were dwindling. Hotels certainly were willing and able to serve visitors another day, but restaurant provisions were almost entirely gone. So it was critical that we finally were able to get people out of Gardner. So now we regroup. When MDOT called this morning, they said that Yankee Jim will be 35 miles an hour. They'll continue to do work, but they want to keep traffic to a minimum so that they can work as well, even as they provide egress for visitors and access in and out for locals, as well as service vehicles and delivery trucks. So it's going to be a little slow going here for a while. It's no pun intended, fluid situation. As Cam mentioned, we'd like to think the highest of the water is already behind us, but we can't say that for sure just yet. There's still quite a bit of snow up high, but we have been given a little bit of a timeout here. The river's backed off quite a bit, and that's what has allowed the roads to open up and for us to kind of start to take stock and figure out what next steps are. So we're working through it. And it's a lot on top of a lot. And Cam showed some pictures of his roads. We've lost several roads in Park County and around the region as well. In addition to the 3 bridges we lost in Crook City, Park County lost 1 bridge over the Yellowstone near near Tom Minor Basin, just this other side of Yankee Jim Canyon. Had another bridge compromised in the middle of Paradise Valley. So the traffic that we're sending out has to take a more creative route that was also just cleared of mud and debris by front end loaders and loads of gravel. So that's kind of where we are. And yeah, I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Berg, and thank you, Superintendent Shally. Just a few housekeeping reminders as we open this up to Q&A. At the bottom of your Zoom screen is a Q&A function. Please consider submitting your questions this way so we can get to as many as possible. If you can please also identify which news organization you are with along with your question, that's appreciated. You may also raise your hand using the hand button at the bottom of your screen. We will start with the written Q&A and then call in as many people as possible with their hands up. If we call on you, you will be unmuted and be able to speak for those with your hands up. So our first question here is Frank Baker. I think this is for Superintendent Shally. Superintendent Shally, if you could please put this flooding in historical context. Has Yellowstone ever seen anything of this magnitude? How do you measure the magnitude, the area affected, the amount of damage, and what is the impact on the animals in the park?
Well, so this isn't my word, so I haven't vetted this, but I've heard this is a 1,000-year event, whatever that means these days. They seem to be happening more and more frequently. So I don't know exactly what context to put it in historically, except from what I understand, one of the highest cubic feet per second ratings for the Yellowstone River recorded in the 90s was at 31,000 CFS, and Sunday night we were at 51,000 CFS. So that gives you a bit of context of how big this was from the last kind of major kind of high water event that the park had. As far as the animals, this spring, this is going into my 4th summer here. This has been the most spectacular animal viewing that I've seen. I think I've seen somewhere between 15 and 18 grizzlies in the last 6 weeks, large numbers of bison, wolves. And as of right now, we don't think the animals are being largely affected, except there's no visitors, at least currently, watching them.
Thank you, Superintendent Shally. Next question is Refn Prevost of Yellowstone Gate. He's asking, is NPS considering using the one-way Old Gardner Road for access for staff and or public?
Yeah, so remember when we weren't sure, the Highway 89 just opened this morning. We weren't sure if when the floodwaters receded, whether or not that was going to be possible or not. So we had developed 2 contingency options. One, there is an Old Gardner Road. It's not, it doesn't have a super stable road base, but we are looking to make some temporary improvements to that road so that we can have some type of access between Mammoth and Gardner. And the sense of urgency from the standpoint of visitor evacuations out of Gardner is over for right now. But we still want to have that link for a variety of different reasons in case Highway 89 closes again. And we also have other contingencies, including using the park aircraft. Both Governor of Wyoming and Montana offered National Guard air resources for resupplying Gardner. So we'll have those plans ready if it becomes necessary in the future. But for right now, we will continue the plans to improve that the Old Gardner Road. It will not be able to be used for normal 2-way traffic. It'd have to be controlled, probably directional traffic with a certain number of cars at certain points in time. But that's where we are with that right now.
All right, thank you. And a question from Sam Howd. I'm not sure which news organization Sam is with. Have there been any injuries to Park Service staff or the public due to the flooding?
As of right now, in considering, and I know most of you know how big Yellowstone is, that we moved every visitor out of this park in 24 hours, basically. We have not had any visitor injuries. We did have a cardiac arrest at Madison Campground yesterday, which did result in a fatality. It was not flood related. And there has been at this point no injuries, knock on wood, to employees either.
Okay, and a question from Ethan Holmes. What are the expected impacts of flooding and related infrastructural damage on this summer's tourism? How long do you expect it will take to repair impacted roads around the park and its gateway communities?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned, I think I addressed that in my comments. We won't know until we can assess. We're going to do everything we can to safely reopen. That'll start with the Southern Loop in some modified way as far as visitor access goes, and we're working on a range of alternatives for what, and engaging a lot of partners and stakeholders on what that might look like. I think the Southern Loop, in comparison to the road between Gardner or Mammoth and Cook City, night and day. So I think the Southern Loop will be open and ready for access relatively soon, but the northern end is going to take a considerable amount of time and effort to get that reopened, even though we will do everything we possibly can to do it as quickly as we can.
All right, thank you. We'll take one from Lindsay Whitehurst with the Associated Press. How many visitors were in the park before evacuations began?
That's a good question. Our average visitation in June can be, between 15,000, 20,000, in that range. I don't have an exact figure for you, but it was well over 10,000 visitors safely in the park. And then I think we calculated several thousand that had been stranded in Gardner alone.
Okay, and Bella Butler from Explore Big Sky. Is there any economic relief planned for gateway communities impacted by the closures? And how might people support communities like Gardner and Cook City during this time? I'm not sure if this is a question for you or Commissioner Berg.
I'll let Bill go first. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. We've had a number of organizations reach out to offer their support. Had phone calls from Governor Gianforte and Senator Tester this morning. They're certainly tuned into what's going on here, and I think recognize the economic challenge that is to come. We're just getting started. We're just getting started.
Okay, another question for Superintendent Shalley from Jonathan Make of the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. Superintendent Shalley, can you address if Yellowstone National Park has ever entirely closed before? Is there a range of time for how long this closure may last?
Yeah, we closed for 2 months 2 years ago for COVID, if everybody remembers. We've closed a couple times for government shutdowns in past years, but I don't believe we've ever closed the park for flooding.
Okay, and a question from Kathy Walker with KOA in Denver. Boulder in northern Colorado recovered from devastating floods in 2013. How can people afar who love Yellowstone help you now?
Well, first of all, I think it's one of the really important points about these calls is so that you're getting as much information from us as possible, and so that the amount of coverage that we got yesterday alone has spawned a massive amount of interest at various levels. I think the important thing is for us to understand that we're only 36 hours into this event to figure out what we're actually dealing with, what those needs are, and then through a variety of ways we'll be able to identify ways that people can help. But thanks for that question, Kathy.
Can I pitch in briefly?
Yes,
Yeah.
please. And the next one's for you.
Yeah, I'll just throw out that even though the park is not likely to open, won't open on the north end, once we get the roads improved, folks in Gardner would still like to see you come, make a reservation, come on into Gardner, head to West Yellowstone, head to Cook City, book a room, and enjoy what you can at the gateways. And, during COVID, when there was a lot of concern over the future viability of gateway communities, people were making proactive reservations for the next season or 2 seasons out. And also just stay tuned to social media as needs arise. I'm sure there'll be messages about where those pinch points are.
Okay, and Commissioner Berg, sorry, Superintendent Shalley, did
No,
you want to change in?
I was just going to piggyback on that a little bit. I think it's really important for people to understand how much there is to do in these gateways outside of the park. I know a lot of people come to the gateways to visit Yellowstone, but there's a tremendous amount outside. And I just echo what Bill just commented on.
Okay, Commissioner Berg, can you provide insight? Will Highway 89 stay open to residents at this point?
That is certainly the idea. As Cam mentioned, we don't know what's going to happen with the river over the weekend. The ice is out of the Yellowstone Lake. The snowpack is coming down. I'm looking at Electric Peak out there right now. There's still a fair amount of snow out there, and that has to come down. We would like it not to come down all at once. So, this is life. There's no do-overs, timeouts, or guarantees, but the runoff should be over fairly soon, and then we should have some predictability, but we're not quite there yet.
And for a follow-up for you from Douglas Scott on this topic, any time frame from when Gardner will open for all traffic, not just locals?
Yeah, that depends on the assessment of the road conditions, which they're just now getting a look at, and their ability to do work. Montana Department of Transportation has already contracted Riverside Contracting to repair the bridge at Point of Rocks, which will pull traffic off the East River Road and allow for better flow. That's going to take a while. I can't say how long. Yankee Jim Canyon is going to need a lot of work. There were other portions of the road that were underwater. So stay tuned, but that's Yellowstone's original entrance. There's certainly no intention of taking our time here. Everybody's got that as a top priority.
And we have Nicole Pollock with the Casper Star Tribune for Superintendent Shelley. Are park workers also being evacuated? If there are still employees inside the park, where are they? And how is the Park Service housing workers who lost their previous homes?
So for the 6 employees, thanks for that question, Nicole. The 6 employees that lost their housing in Gardner, we've already relocated them, at least to temporary housing, and we'll be looking for permanent fixes or permanent placements for them to go to. We have, remember this just happened Sunday, so we have a full contingent of staff in Yellowstone. That means upwards of 800 to 1,000 Park Service employees and volunteers, and somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 concession employees that run our hotels, restaurants, gas stations, and things like that. When you take on something like this, it's not a light switch. We can't just flip it. What you'll see with a lot of people that are working in the Park Service is they may be doing jobs they don't normally do to support emergency operations. We have every intention of reopening the Southern Loop, and we will need a full contingent of staff to handle that. So there are a smattering of employees that are, maybe not able to get to the park. We do have 11 employees at the northeast entrance that are isolated right now. They can't go out and they can't come in. We're providing them support. But generally speaking, everybody that's here is finding something to do. We have a lot to do. And once we get operational, we'll need those folks to be ready to go.
Okay, and another question for you, if you're able to address this, how are National Park Service lodging properties, our concessioners, dealing with canceling reservations? This is from Wendy Core at KULR Channel 8.
It's challenging for not just the business operations in the park or business operators in the park, but also the gateway communities, hotels that have taken reservations. You've got people not only from across America, but around the globe that have trips planned to Yellowstone. They're looking at what's happening and determining whether they're going to make those trips. Anytime you take full hotels of people and say your reservation's canceled and you have to leave, that's not a good thing for your business model. And it's another reason why it's important that we come up with a safe way to get reopened as soon as possible, not only for the operations within the park, but also to support the gateway community businesses.
Okay, and a question for you from John Schur with Montana Television Network. Where will northern access be cut off? For instance, will it be at Canyon or Tower Roosevelt, and where between Norris and Mammoth?
Yeah, thanks, John. We'll swing the gate at Canyon, so that should be no different than what we did for the last 2 years when we were doing the Dunraven project. So that'll be one hard closure, and then we will swing the gate at Norris, going north. So everybody will be able to make the full southern loop, but they will not be able to come to Mammoth, and they won't be able to go over Dunraven.
Okay, and a question for Herb Scribner with Axios. Earlier, you mentioned half of the park can't support visitation. Does that mean half of the park will remain closed for a considerable amount of time? And I'm going to tack on one from Zach Taylor with the Cody Enterprise as well. Would opening the southern loop include using all 3 entrances, east, west, and south, and opening those at the same time?
Yeah, so when we open the southern loop, we will open west entrance, south entrance, and east entrance. North entrance and northeast entrance will remain closed until we figure out what we're going to do on the northern end. Yeah, I think I hit those points in relationship to the difference in timing. The southern loop, we feel we can open relatively quickly. We've got to get organized on some things. The northern loop is going to be more extensive and require condition assessments and damage assessments that need to be done before we can figure out what the plan is there for a reconstruction strategy.
Okay, and we have Alex Traub with the New York Times. How many backcountry campers are still in the park? Why is it that it currently seems unnecessary to perform a helicopter evacuation for them? And are these backcountry campers not considered visitors, since you said all visitors have been evacuated?
Yeah, it's a fair point. We've made contact with every backcountry group that was permitted to be in the backcountry to check for their safety and to make sure that wherever they were, they can get out. So there are, I believe, 12 people still left in the backcountry that are safe, that we know are safe, and that are making their way out. So it's fair to say that the front country visitors and cars and things like that are out of the park. We still have some people that were in the backcountry further in that are going to take a little more time to get out. Thanks for that question, though.
Okay, and Kurt Repenschek from National Parks Traveler. What is the outlook for concessioners, particularly Xanterra, with lodges at Canyon Tower and Mammoth?
So Mammoth will not reopen this year, likely, or the reopening of the Mammoth Hotel will be largely predicated on how we do with the road condition assessments. There's a possibility, and I the Mammoth Hotel could open, but we've got substantial damage to water and sewer lines in Mammoth and in Gardner, and so the opening of the Mammoth Hotel, because there's a way we could open that and people could access it from the south, but that's, unless we get the wastewater treatment infrastructure back in place, we won't bring large numbers of visitors back into Mammoth. As far as Canyon and Old Faith, Canyon right now, we would include in the reopening of the southern loop. We have had, with the high water wastewater treatment issues there that we're monitoring. And so before we make a decision to open any of the hotels or properties in the southern loop, or start allowing Xanterra to take reservations for those properties, campgrounds or hotels, we want to make sure that that infrastructure is capable of supporting high numbers of visitors.
Okay, and a question from Billy Arnold with the Jackson Hole News and Guide. Are Yellowstone and Gateway communities in Park County applying for disaster and relief funding through FEMA? And do you anticipate any funding coming through FEMA's small business relief programs for businesses that operate in the park?
So remember, we're 36 hours into this. I think we'll be looking at a variety of fund sources. I know the gateways will. Bill can speak to maybe what's going on in Gardner. We will look at a full range of different funding avenues depending on what we need. We first need to know what that is before we start looking to get projects funded. And as far as the support for businesses and that kind of thing, we'll support whatever avenues those businesses want to support for economic relief. Bill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll just throw in that we've just stood up our incident command teams, and they're getting their feet under themselves, even as we had been focusing on economic recovery from COVID. So we'll just pile those efforts together. We're already working with the Northern Rocky Mountain Economic Development District out of Bozeman. And yeah, we'll do our best to leave no stone unturned. And when we were talking about how to support gateway communities, I want to add 2 words: gift certificates. You know, they put cash in the registers of those businesses and are a future promise of support. So another great way that you can just pick a business in these gateways and show them a little love.
Okay, and a question for Superintendent Shally from Mike Koshmerl with WyoFile. What are the potentially compromised areas along the South Loop? Can you share a few more details about that?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just south of Canyon, if you've been in the park, there's a section of road that's about 400 feet that we've had substantial issues with over the years. We end up going in and repaving it every single year. We call that sliding meadows. And there is a water line that runs under that. So we've seen that shift. We've seen some breaks in the asphalt. It has not been compromised to the point where vehicles can't go over it, but it's something that we want to monitor. We do feel that if the water line under that section of road is broken, that could cause a collapse of that 300 to 400 foot section. So we want to be sure that that's going to be okay. On the west entrance road, the Madison River was right up against the road edge yesterday, and those waters have subsided substantially. We have had a couple of other areas like Firehole River Drive and some others that have been underwater to one degree or another. And we also want to be cognizant of any bridge crossings that may need to be inspected and make sure that those are safe for visitors as well. One other section between Lake and Grant, as I understand, is also been compromised and eroded from one side. We think that's fixable, and it may take a few days to get that shored up.
Okay, we have a question from Kim O'Connell, writing for National Parks Traveler. Will there be any assessment of whether road rights of way should be adjusted for more resilience against future flooding, especially given climate change and the likelihood of more severe storms and events with climate change?
Yeah, it's maybe I'm not sure if you were on when I was speaking earlier, Kim, but it's a great question. If you look at the road between here and Gardner, not only it may not even be possible to build the road in the same alignment if you could, and I'm not sure you would want to if you could, because of what you just talked about. I don't think it's going to be smart to invest potentially tens of millions of dollars or however much it is into repairing a road that may be subject to a similar flooding event in the future. So like the road between here and Gardner, we are looking at pulling the road potentially away from the river and putting it on a completely different alignment to make a better investment and to avoid a similar issue in the future. So it's a great point.
Okay, and we have a question from Lori Edmo at the Showband News at Fort Hall. For Superintendent Shally, when will you make a decision on the Yellowstone 150th event on whether it will happen?
So first of all, thanks for that question and for all the great work we've been doing with tribes in this 150th anniversary year. I don't know. There's so much. I think we're up to 16 tribes participating in the Yellowstone Revealed initiative at the Arch the week of August 22nd. For those of you that don't know, that's going to be a huge tribal landscape or tribal encampment, an incredible week with an ability for visitors to interact directly with tribes. We're going to need to kind of see what the condition of Gardner is. I really want to see that event proceed. And I think that if you look at what we're just talking about coming to Gardner, even if people can't necessarily come all the way into the park, I think that's another great example of an event that we'd like to continue to plan for and have people attend for a variety of different reasons. Most importantly, the tribe's back on the Yellowstone landscape, but secondly, there would be a correlating economic benefit to Gardner if we do that. So I don't have a definitive answer, but my mindset is now that we need to really continue to plan for that event. And absent something more catastrophic happening, as long as the road is open to Livingston and that kind of thing, I think we should continue to plan for it.
Okay, thank you. And Michael Doyle with E&E News, can you elaborate on what was required to find and evacuate those in the park backcountry?
So we know where they are based on the backcountry permits and where the backcountry sites are. And so we flew several missions, and some of those campers, or backcountry campers, as I understand, were outfitters that had some type of communications device. I don't have all the exact details of how we contacted them all, but I do know that we have done that.
Okay, I'm going to try and combine a couple of questions here, Superintendent Shelley. So I think you've addressed this a little bit. Lindsay Whitehurst from the Associated Press, do you expect the northern entrances to be closed for the season? Ann Woolsey from Fox Weather asking for clarification of what do we consider to be the end of your season? And then finally, Steve Gorman from Reuters, to answer just as best as you can, Yellowstone National Park as a whole will likely remain closed to visitors for at least how much longer?
Let's see. It's hard for me to, so I mean, I really want you guys to understand how dynamic this is. The water's still raging. We haven't done damage assessments. Without those damage assessments, it's really hard to come up with an exact timeline or even a good general timeline. The season, so give us a few more days to get the water down and to get teams looking at what is going to be required. And we will be able to give you much better data and information on timing. What I would suggest is the end of the season is probably the end of October, going into maybe early November, depends on the year. Early November is when we close the roads in the southern portion of the park normally anyway, get ready for winter use. And so I think it's safe to say that it's going to be an extended period of time. The northern end will be closed in relationship to the southern loop. I would say that we are shooting for a week or less to open the southern loop. But once again, that's complicated because that is contingent upon us developing an appropriate visitor use plan. We've got a lot of work that's been done in visitor use management. We have some good actions and strategies. We're going to socialize, and we are socializing those with Gateway communities, other partners. We share visitation with Grand Teton. They've got to be in sync with us. So we're going to do everything possible to make sure we come up with the right framework for that, understanding that it will be adjustable depending on how it's working. The one thing that even the gateways agree with me on is that trying to put normal visitation into one loop of Yellowstone is a disaster waiting to happen. So we've also got to make sure that the infrastructure that we have in that loop can support whatever number that we bring in. I hope that answered your question okay for right now.
All right, thank you. And we're just about at time. So we're going to take a few last questions here. Following on that from the AP, for people who are not familiar with the geography of the park, can you name a couple of the famous landmarks in the southern loop and a few in the northern loop?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share the map if you guys want again, but the southern loop would basically be Old Faithful, Madison, Norris Geyser Basin, Canyon, Lake, and Grant Village, in addition to the East Entrance Road, the South Entrance, which goes to Cody, the South Entrance Road, which goes to Grand Teton and Jackson, and the West Entrance Road, which goes to West Yellowstone. Those would all be included in kind of the southern loop.
All right. And I
I
know
think we're okay, Kristen.
all right. And also from Lori, will you be assessing the flood impacts on cultural resources in the park?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we've got a variety of, we've tried to deal with the most emergent things that are in our face right now. And we're going to systematically get more and more organized and be able to not only assess the major damage associated with the floods, but what other types of damage may have occurred to other resources within the park.
Okay. And then Kurt Rappenscheck, National Parks Traveler, does DOI have emergency funds it can access to tackle the repair, rebuild, or will some work simply have to wait until funds are available?
I think this is a pretty important thing. I've had good conversations with the Department of Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, the Director of the Park Service, Chuck Sams. I think we've got good support from Congress. We have a variety of different fund sources that we can look at. I can't promise everything's going to come in exactly when we need it. It's incumbent upon us here in the park to make those assessments, put those packages together, get the cost estimates, and then work with as many people as possible and as many fund sources as possible to get them funded as quickly as possible.
Okay, and we're going to take one last question here so that you can move on to your next obligation in the park today. For reporters who we didn't get to, we will do our best to do individual follow-ups as we can throughout the afternoon and into tomorrow. So Todd Wilkinson has asked, what is the status of the Mammoth Gardner sewer system? Did the pipes break and is it flowing into the Yellowstone River?
We're not 100% sure. We have to wait. Todd, once again, it's one of those things that we won't be able to know until we see. We're assuming that that's the case. And we are taking measures to mitigate if discharge is occurring. We are talking to DEQ in Wyoming about ways that we can kind of move forward on that. That'll become part of the package in the assessments that we do if that needs to be replaced. Both for the line that moves from Mammoth to Gardner and then whatever damage the Gardner system has sustained.
Okay, and we'll just do Commissioner Berg, if you have any closing remarks and then anything closing from Superintendent Shelley.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. One is, Todd, thanks for that question. That under the river sewer line failed, I believe it was in the early 90s, and Superintendent Shelley and I have been talking for a couple of years now about the possibility of putting that above the river along with the 8-inch water line. And I don't know if this is going to force us to replace that if it has indeed failed, but that's one of the options we have looked at. I also want to point out that the Park Service, the Forest Service in Park County recently received notice that we are receiving funding for a federal lands access program project to restore the road from the arch through Yankee Jim Canyon along the old rail bed. And one significant reason for that would be to provide secondary access in the event of an emergency. Portions of that rail bed slid in, I think it was in 2014, and it's been impassable except for hikers and bikers since. So we hope to soon have that restored. We haven't seen how it held up during this recent event. And truth be told, there was water over portions of that route, but it might well have provided another somewhat sporty option here for secondary access from Paradise Valley into the Gardner Basin. And other than that, thank you all for your time and attention and interest. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. And Superintendent Shelley.
I'll just echo that. Thank you to all of you for reporting on this. I know some of those answers that you might want in more detail, we can't provide right now. We'll continue to work diligently to get more progress, more organized, so those answers can be answered a little better, or those questions can be answered a little bit better. I want to make sure everybody understands also that we've had good success here in replacing deferred infrastructure and addressing deferred maintenance. But I also think that this shows that it's important to make sure that we're building our assets in a resilient way, understanding the future may be different than the past, and that we continue to work together to identify what needs to be done, and make sure that what we're doing here can accomplish the mission of the service, which is protection of this place first and foremost, and enjoyment of this place at the same time. That's sometimes contradictory, but it is really important. And thanks to all of you for helping us achieve that.
All right, thank you very much. With that, that will conclude today's call. We will do our best again to get the recording out to those who have asked for it as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
Recording stopped.